Welcome back for part two on developing your culture with work from home teams. Let's jump back in. Randall, in a virtual work environment, meetings are often recording, right? For different purposes. People just have their AI bots automatically on in case they need to reference the meeting for their own purposes, to share with a client, to share with a colleague, to share with a manager, for future onboarding, for training, all those things. I see this, tell me, maybe you could speak to this, how this practice of recording meetings is in a way stifling development of relationships because people are not gonna, tell the story, tell the personal share, tell the joke, because they know that the recording is going to be seen by who knows who.
I think that the question of recording is actually a fascinating one. Okay, culturally, okay, actually from a business perspective, the idea of recording a meeting, okay, was considered, is that legal? It's certainly not ethical, right? Like that was, I had a contact of mine many years ago. We're having lunch somewhere, and he wanted to ask me about a particular person who I knew, okay, and who I wouldn't do any work with, okay, for a bunch of reasons. And he says, yeah, I'm thinking about going into business with so and so, but I was very, very upset. I said, well, why is that? He says, I had a meeting, excuse me, I had a meeting, and the meeting was essentially halfway through, I noticed in the person's sleeve, there's a little wire that was poking out. And and this is the person talking to me, and he says, "What is, sorry, what's that wire that's in your sleeve?" He says, "Oh, I record all of our meetings." And he said, I'm sorry, what?" And needless to say, he was very upset about it.
In a business environment where, it's driven by billable hours and time with clients, um, how are you supposed to find time for that needed relationship building time when you work from home? Because usually when you meet over for a meeting, it's very, purposeful. You have an agenda, you have things to talk about, client work, and people are busy. And it feels that sort of like chatting before a meeting, chatting after the meeting at the water cooler isn't happening. Can you speak to how to allocate those social touch points?
Let me speak to it because I think that you hit on a very good point, which is, beforehand we didn't have the opportunity to record it. Okay, now recording has become very, very um, potentially acceptable. And in fact, there's huge benefits of it. You mentioned some of them for onboarding, for trainings. Geez, somebody missed a meeting, etc. And I think that in a certain sense, one of the things that's been corrosive in a lot of cultures is gossip and speaking poorly of other people. And I think in a certain sense, the fact that things are being recorded, it means that people have to watch what comes out of their mouth. Not generally a bad thing.
I think that for many employees, there is a lack of clarity in a work from home or like different office, different geographic locations, how relationship is supposed to be built with your colleagues. And relationship is very important to build trust and work optimally and develop high performing teams. How are people in different locations, work from home or different sites, supposed to create that relationship when it's not clear if there's time allocated for that to happen on company dollar or not, or is it in your personal time? Management is not talking about it with their employees, and this is new to a lot of employees and managers.
I'll tell you how I do it, okay? Because I've done this many times. And we're recording something for some particular purpose. And then when we're done the meeting, I'll say, "Can I stop the recording? And I would love to have a little more chat with you." The recording comes off, and then the quote real conversation begins. And that part is not recorded. And for managers to recognize that they have to have that on and off recording conversation, and not to assume that because it's recorded, everything's okay in terms of like, I shouldn't say everything's okay, but that's enough to build the relationship. I think is kind of silly, right? And so many times at the end of the meeting, there's a joke in real life meetings, right? Everyone gets in the meeting takes place, and then the meeting is adjourned, and then all of a sudden there's the meeting that's after the meeting, right? And there's these conversations, I mentioned them, serendipitous conversations. And those serendipitous conversations is when stuff really gets done and where relationships are actually bonded. And so I'm saying that we can do a little bit of that, okay, by when we're having a meeting, if it's a one-on-one meeting, to stop, or maybe a small group one at a certain point at the very end when the meeting's business is done, is to turn off the recording and then have those conversations or have at least the possibility of them. It's not the same.
So
Okay, and you're right. I think something's lost, but it's something. Sometimes things can be done in a clumsy way. Sometimes it's very clear in the manager's mind what they're hoping to do, build relationship, whatever it is. But unless they actually say to their staff member, hey, listen, I want to get together, at least once a week for just a informal touch base, not a formal thing. At least you kind of know where it's coming from. But to the point of, the meeting after the meeting always happened in real life, right? It always happened. Okay, the meeting's done. You walk the client to the door. You're having the conversation along there, and then all of a sudden they ask another question, or you ask them a question, etc. And things happen. That's an example of something that we need to find ways to replace. And so the when you turn the recording off in a certain small way, that might take the place of it. Your manager who's having a Friday afternoon schmooze, okay, for an hour, and what's he doing? I mean, I've got stuff to do, I've got deadlines, etc. Right? They might have the perfect sort of mindset for it, but don't keep it a secret. But on the other hand, if you've got that good a relationship with that person, you can say to them when they're calling it at a bad time for you, hey, listen, I just don't have time. I've got to prepare a whole bunch of stuff. It's Friday afternoon, right? So I think it's an interesting thing. Speaking once again, the fact that many managers don't know. And how do they find out? Either it's modeled from above, which means the leaders somehow know it, or it's trained from outside. Okay. Okay, now let's go up to leaders. Okay, the leader calls on Friday afternoon for that 1 hour schmooze with their staff member, the manager. How do they know? Well, the manager is not going to say, I gotta go, goodbye. This is the big boss who's calling, right? So how do they find out? Well, they find out based on, well, sorry, who are they modeling after, right? And that's kind of where coaching comes in for them, right? So it's a funny kind of thing. You know what you know. We think that we've got it right because we've gone through COVID, several years ago, but we don't. We've got a lot of people who are just swimming along, and we've got this conflict, particularly in the large organizations where there's this huge pressure to get back to the office from the top, and there's a huge pressure from the bottom about we don't want to, because whatever the reason is, and the managers in the middle are feeling the pressure from both sides. And there's good reasons for both sort of perspectives. But unless you're able to figure out that kind of thing, what's the impact on the work from home culture? It's not one that moves the whole organization forward. It's one that's mired, or the foundation is based on some conflict, right? Gee, you've got a privilege to work from home. Okay, well, I don't know. Back at the office, we used to get free lunch every day. Not getting it now.
you talked about the free lunch. Okay, so when you're working from home, usually there's no free lunch. To my mind, many work from home companies are, high-fiving, they're saving lots of money. Hopefully they are not providing, having all those in-office expenses. I've spoken with work from home colleagues who, do not get perks, and I've spoken with work from home colleagues who get amazing perks. The company says we're not cleaning the office, we're going to give you a budget for cleaning your home office, and we don't provide a company gym, so we're going to contribute towards your gym membership. What do you think about that? Should that be part of the norm or part of the budget of a work from home virtual company?
So what I would say is this, the whole question, I think some of those perks, if you will, are ridiculous. Okay. But I also think that if you're expecting somebody to work literally 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, maybe giving some of those perks means that the person's stress level and the employee retention is going to have a big thing. Most companies are not doing what the Silicon Valley platforms are doing, and a lot of those have actually ratcheted right down. I think though that the question of okay, big company or mid-sized company even, um, if you're saving so much money, why shouldn't some of that sort of go to the employees? What are you doing with respect to making sure that they're actually productive at home? What are you doing with respect to the training you're investing in them? Okay, what like there's all these different things. I see no reason why that shouldn't happen. I'll also point out that if you spoke to many CFOs, they'll say, well, we're not actually saving money. In fact, it's really painful. What do you mean by that? Well, we've got a 5-year lease on the 75,000 square feet that's costing us a fortune, and the desks are empty. We can't sublet it. We can't get out of the lease. Gee, we've got a 10-year lease on the third floor of the 10th floor of this big building. We can't get out of that lease. We're paying money through the teeth, and we don't have bums and seats. And we're not getting the collaboration we need and the serendipitous conversations and blah, 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 blah. We need people sitting in here. We're paying for it all. And when they're working from home and we're giving them these work from home benefits and everything, it's like we're paying here and we're paying there. It's not sustainable. So that's the kind of a CFO perspective. And there's some merit to that, okay, in the shorter term. But in the longer term, guess what? They're going to be reducing the number of square feet they're going to be leasing. They're going to change office space from all these little, independent offices to things that are a little bit more conducive to collaboration. So when hybrid and remote workers come into the office, it's a lot easier to actually build, those collaborative conversations, the serendipitous meetings, the different types of meeting rooms, the ones that are set up for to also include remote workers, even, if some of them are in the office and some of them are remote. So in the medium longer term, that argument is absolutely bang on. In the shorter term, the 5 years for many organizations, they're already paying. They can't get out of these leases without there's nobody clamoring to take all this empty office space. And so, that's an interesting angle. By the way, that's why oftentimes senior managers are like the C-level suitors get people in here. It's not that they're old people and that's the way we know how to work, but it's also the financial angle of we're paying for this. The people, will get more done here. I'll also say one other thing. Sorry, I just have to say this. Um, Building a work from home culture and operating a business with a hybrid. Um, One of the huge benefits of in-person, working in person, live in person, is that there's a lot of mentorship that happens. And there's a lot of talent identification that happens as well. Okay, all of a sudden you need something done. And you had a number of conversations with so-and-so in the department down the hall, a junior person. And so you go to their manager and say, something, I've got a small project. Can you lend so and so for a period of time? It'd be a good career, enrichment for them, but we also need that. And you wouldn't have known about that person down the hall unless you were actually down the hall. So if we want to build a culture, workplace culture that's powerful, we need to make sure that we have the opportunities for this kind of mentorship. I'm not talking about the mentorship program, okay, but I'm talking about the identification of talent, okay, the nurturing of them, the investing in them, okay, and sometimes the saying, like maybe there's secondment programs where people move around to different parts. Maybe there's ways that people can work on special projects from time to time in other areas as well. Okay, so that's also just as important. A bit of a sidebar, but I think important point.
You mention often to me, to clients, the value of the serendipitous conversation that happens in in-person offices, right? So you have the impromptu exchange by the water cooler. You overhear people talking next to you, and you go, "Oh, I can help you with that. I can unblock you there," right? So there's meaning to that. There's relationship building in that. But I wonder now, with in a lot of offices, people are at their desk, they're in their office, they're eating at their desk. I wonder how much with all the technology that we have, all the tools, the Slack, the email, how much of that serendipitous conversation is really happening. We hear from clients that people really are individually siloed. Do you want to speak to that?
Can tell you what's happening right now in these offices because I've had a number of conversations with leaders. Okay. And managers. Well, I go into the office I sit down at my desk and I'm on Teams all day with my colleagues in different places. Okay, this is stupid. Why am I coming in? Right?
Right.
So that's one of the things that's happening. The other thing that's happening is we've got these new tools. These tools are here to stay. It's really convenient to hop on a Teams meeting or Zoom meeting, okay, and have those conversations in ways that are far, far more powerful than just telephone, right? Slack and having threaded conversations or some of the other ones like that are they're here to stay. And by the way, when it's a hybrid workforce, some at the office and some remote, it's critically important because that makes sure everybody's wired in. But on the other hand, when you're in the office, you do have those conversations. It's not like everyone's in a hermetically sealed bubble. And I've also had conversations on that and how refreshing it is, right? So, how could it be refreshing on one side, but gee, this is a waste. I'm coming in, I'm just having, Teams or Zoom meetings with everyone. It's because they're both happening. I think that every time we learn a new tool, okay, the old ones don't go away. Well, sometimes they go away. We don't use telex anymore. We rarely use fax, okay? But you know, all these new things, they're not going away. They're a net addition. The trick is to make sure that, and this is what we've been talking about, that we don't lose the either the cultural dimension of saying, okay, what makes us us? If we're going to have an internal brand of fill in the blank, yeah, it's got to infuse what you do on Teams or Zoom. It's got to infuse what you do in the one-on-ones, or even if you do the virtual Zooms, etc. But it also has to do with with what you do in terms of training or coaching your people. It has to do with what you do to bring them together. Okay, at all hands meetings or an annual sort of kickoff or whatever it is so that you can reinforce all these things. And yeah, you're not going to give up Slack or Teams or Zoom or whatever it is that you use. It's just that there's more here. We just have to make sure we don't lose the ability to manage. So
You described earlier the shift that managers have to move from managing by the minute to managing by task. And then you described the double dipping of employees moonlighting at a second or third job, and how this is a failure of management. What we see a lot is, your best performer, high performer workers are rewarded with more work. So how do you create some equity there for your employees? If the reward for finishing your work is just more work, is it really inherently wrong if an employee diligently does their work, but then, takes a second gig to get more money for their family? That's inherently wrong.
I think and this is going well beyond sort of the culture conversation. I think it's a question of this. Yeah, there's some employees who just they punch the clock because they 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 need to be paid and they want the money. They got to feed their families and pay their rent and all that kind of stuff. There's other employees who are inherently ones who are learning people, who are thinking people, and for them, okay, they tend to seek out challenges because they realize every time they do something new, that particular experience will enrich themselves. Okay, not just the man, if you want to call it that. And so I think it's if your job is to do a job, it's not just to do a set of tasks, it's to help the organization achieve whatever that objective is. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that somebody who is faster, it's not being penalized by giving more stuff. It's just that they've shown that she or he has got the capability of doing more, and therefore is effectively auditioning for um, more senior opportunities in a certain sense. Okay, the person who's not sort of working as fast is not going to get those experiences, and therefore it'll take them far, far longer to earn the right to that more senior role or that better territory or whatever it happens to be. And it's not to say that the person who's slow or is not a thinking person or is got a bunch of side hustles. If they're doing the job that the managers ask them to do, then that's fine. But I think that some managers don't have a handle on what their people are doing, and they don't know how to develop their people. And I think that's a management problem, not the individual contributor's problem. I think it's when individual contributors start to think, well, you know what, even though I'm being paid to do this job, I'm going to I'm going to try, I'm going to steal the pencils and the staplers because they're free. They're like this isn't what good staff do. They're more thinking about, gee, how can I learn more? How can I develop myself more? How can I give myself more experiences along the way? How can I be more efficient as part of it? Because as anyone learns something, they become more efficient at it, right? As you learn new technical tools, you become more efficient at it. So the fact that you become more efficient at it because we've got word processors rather than typewriters, our output increases, right? But that opens up space for more learning and more capability and more better client service or better R&D or better whatever it happens to be, right? And I think that um, um, by sort of um, you sort of bring up another interesting point, which is this: how do you, as an individual employee, properly let your manager know all the crazy, amazing things that you're doing? So a lot of people are very humble and they don't want to sort of toot their own horn. Other people are they do the whisper of work and they've got trumpets blaring, right? And they see nothing wrong with that either, right? So there's some point in the middle that says, okay, how do we make sure that our managers know about the brilliance that we're doing? And the answer to that lays in communication. Part of it is the daily stand-ups. Part of it is the weekly touch points. Part of it is the skip manager meetings. Part of it is the performance appraisal. Part of it is the actual quantifiable results of what you're doing, not just the process of doing it, right? All these things, a good manager whose antennas are up and asks good questions, okay, should be able to say, okay, I know it. I don't need to know all the details, but I know because I trust this person because they've always delivered that they can do these things. And if it turns out this person wants to do a side hustle and everything like that, so long as they're doing all the other things, it's not you're not buying 24 hours of their day. They've got personal lives, they've got other priorities, etc. That's not as much of an issue. I guess maybe I'm a bit more sensitive to it because recently I 2 weeks ago I was speaking to somebody and um, they relayed a story. It was actually shocking to me. They relayed a story about how one of their former staff members decided who was laid off. Okay, and this person was somewhere else as well. Said, "Can you look at my resume? I certainly appreciate some of your feedback. And so that's fine. Happy to give the feedback. It wasn't me, by the way. Happy to give the feedback and looked at the resume. And interestingly, at all the entire 2 years that this person reported in on their resume, it showed that they also were working in another company at the same time. Okay, and it was like two full-time jobs that they were sort of scrunched into one on the resume. And the feedback to me was, they were kind of a very, very average to below average employee. Okay. And I guess now I know why.
You talked, a theme has been how important it is for senior leaders to model the behavior that they want. And certainly, in your view, employees moonlighting is not a best case scenario. You want them using all their efforts and their brains for the company and managers managing their employees. But we often see senior leaders, they themselves holding senior positions or being involved with multiple organizations. So there we have examples of senior leaders role modeling, putting your fingers in different pots. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. By the way, on the idea of CEOs dividing their time, the best example of that is Elon Musk, who was simultaneously the CEO of SpaceX and you know what? Number one, are the investors happy about all this? All the different companies he's the CEO on. Um, the fact that what he's done with Twitter, now known as X, and where you fit on the politics of it is totally beside the point. How can one as a CEO be fully invested in one thing or another? On the other hand, it could very well be, given the strength of a senior leadership team, that they might not need the full-time CEO. I can't imagine that, but I've seen it where somebody is got a very, very strong group of lieutenants, and part of the idea is that there's a bit of a succession planning, and that kind of works. I've also seen where somebody's an investor, okay, where the CEO here, but they also have another role over there. I'm not saying that's right or that this is what to model, okay, but I think that for the CEO role specifically, sometimes there's other factors that come in play. The idea of a CEO is not modeling the cultural behavior is a real problem because people look to the top and say, what's the tone here? Is it are we a such and such organization? And I think that the do as I say, not as I do, okay, is problem. By the way, do as I say. If you're saying that aspirationally, this is what I aspire to, okay, and I'm working towards that particular goal as a leader, that's okay because people understand this is us. We're working towards something. We're not perfect. We're working towards something. But if somebody says uh, I'm a vegetarian, and then you see them sitting down with a big steak in front of themselves, there's a bit of a disconnect there, and you lose a lot of credibility when that's the case. So, um, that's my perspective there.
Okay, Randall, you get the final word. What perspective shift do leaders need, leaders of work from home employees and physically spread out teams need to make?
I could sort of give you one last piece of wisdom. Um, there is no single thing that will build a strong hybrid workplace and the culture that sounds around it, that's around it. It's a whole bunch of small little things together. And to think that you could just press a button and magically everything's going to work is like and is an immature kind of way of looking at how change happens in an organization, right? And so unless you're sort of attacking it from several different angles at the same time, and all these little pieces together sort of move the organization ahead. Okay. And yeah, sometimes there's this one big thing that if you solve, that'll remove a major irritant or make a big movement. But that's kind of that's kind of my last word on it.
Thank you, Randall, for the conversation, and thank you to everyone who joined us and listened in today. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, if you are considering a change in your organization, if you want our perspective, if you're planning a leadership retreat or curious about business coaching or how to better align your spread out team, please reach out. We'd be happy to learn about your organization, have some conversation, share some resources. And if you'd like to get invited to our monthly live Q&A sessions, do reach out info@randallcraig.com or follow us on LinkedIn and we'll follow you.